Hi everyone, welcome to Throwback Thursday. I'm pretty excited about today's Throwback Thursday because I found several important, interesting, very different things that have happened in history on this very day. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. And I think you can then choose which one interests you the most and maybe look into it a little bit more, okay? So to start off with, and I'm just going to use my little cheat sheet that you can't see, but so I get the facts right, in 1738, that's quite a while ago, so a few hundred years ago, and if you want a bit of extra maths problem, you can work out exactly how many years ago from 2020 now, 1738. In 1738, Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine from France invented something. The guillotine. Who knows what that is? If you are a fan of horrible histories, either the books or the TV show, I'm sure you know what a guillotine is. Now, when I was little, I used to call it a guillotine because of the double L, but I've since heard it referred to as the guillotine, and I'm not even 100% sure I'm saying that correctly, but maybe it's got to do with the French spelling of it. In any case, the guillotine was used back in the French Revolution to chop people's heads off. So if you know anything about Henry VIII, you will have heard of this particular instrument. So yeah, it was actually invented by a doctor and it was named after him. Isn't that interesting? Now, horrible histories, I used to have the selection of them in my classroom, and they're such a great way to get interested and involved in all the things that have happened over time in history. So I'm going to put links or images on my Facebook and Instagram pages for the Horrible Histories book series, as well as the television series, which is on ABC Me. I recommend you get into them because they're really well done and very engaging. Something else that happened on this very day, the 28th of May, a long time ago, back in 1779. So we're still in the 1700s here, but we're in a different part of the world. It is Thomas More's birthday. Now, Thomas More is an Irish poet, and he was a very famous Irish poet. And what I'm going to do for that one is actually write out the poem and have it available on Facebook and on Instagram for you to read. Because there are so many different kinds of poetry. And many of you would have studied some form of poetry at school, whether that's learning how to do a haiku, or perhaps doing an acrostic poem, where you choose a word and then you write it down the page, and then you can write a word or a sentence for each starting letter. There's some of the more simple poems, but there are also poems that involve something called iambic pentameter. That's huge. That's the way Shakespeare used to write. So we've got, there are so many levels of poetry. This one here, let me just read you the first stanza. A stanza is a bit like a poetic paragraph, you could say. "'Tis the last rose of summer, left blooming alone. All her lovely companions are faded and gone. No flower of her kindred, no rosebud is nigh, to reflect back her blushes, to give sigh for sigh." Now this poem is about the last rose, and it talks there of all the other roses being gone and how she's all by herself. And it's almost giving that rose a sense of personification, turning it into how a person might feel if they were the last one around. But I'd love for you to read the rest of the poem and make your own interpretation out of it. Okay, now what do we have? I'm going to leave that one to last because I think that's the most fun. So I'm going to jump to 1961. Now that's not that long ago. That's only about 60 years ago. A very important organisation was founded on this day, May 28th in 1961, and that is Amnesty International. Now I've had three classes in particular, where we have looked at the United Nations rights of the child, And what Amnesty International do is they work on human rights issues. So they're a non-profit organisation, and they have, it says here, 8 million members and supporters around the world. And it is their job to look out for human rights violations. So what that means is people around the world who aren't being treated fairly, or who are being treated in an illegal way. And that's a really tricky thing to investigate and a really tricky thing to deal with. So Amnesty International do an incredible job looking out for people who are being mistreated and basically doing what they can to help them. So it's a really huge organisation, it's an important organisation, and it does a lot of good in the world. So we're very lucky that on this very day, May 28th, back in 1961, that was founded. And their headquarters is in the UK, so it's a British organisation, but they work all around the world. And finally, and didn't I tell you they were going to be different? So we've talked about the Guillotine, an Irish poet, human rights. Now check it out. In 1953, on May 28th, Melody was released. Melody was the first 3D animation in technicolour. So what that means is it's basically your first 3D cartoon in colour. And it was released on this very day back in 1953. And I'm so excited to put the link for it, the YouTube link for it, in my comments, in my little description, so you can click on it and have a look. Because animation has come such a long way. When you look at the very first cartoons and how they were created and drawn on cells, and if you've ever used a little flip book, have you ever made yourself a little flip book where you have lots of pages together? What have I got here? This is not a flip book, but say you have a little flip book where you have many, many pages and you do tiny little drawings in the corner. Then when you get it and you flip through, like so, it's almost like a cartoon happens if you change the image. That was a dreadful description, Miss Ali. Dreadful. If you did a picture of a little stick person and each page was slightly different, giving the impression that that stick person was walking. So each page, you move the legs a tiny little bit, you move the arms a tiny little bit. Then when you're finished and you go to flip, it looks like that person is running. That's kind of how old cartoons used to be made, okay? It was one very small step at a time. Now we have amazing technologies, we have computer technologies, and although a lot of work and artistry still goes into it, it's certainly less time consuming than it used to be. So I really encourage you to watch this cartoon. The other thing is with cartoons is they're so helpful. There's a Disney cartoon called Feast, and I use it in the classroom all the time as well because it's a silent cartoon. And yet you learn so much from it, and it's a really good way to teach inference. So by watching the cartoon, the kids look at it and they go, what can I infer? What's going on in this story? And there are no words to tell you. It's all about the visual and the action and taking from it the clues that you can see. So that was a lot of information, but I promise it's going to all be linked on all the sites that we have. So it'll be on Facebook and Instagram. You can ask your big people about that. It'll be on YouTube as well. I encourage you to look at the very interesting 4 different things that we have going on today. All right, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow for Feedback Friday. Bye.